The BMW E32 is one of the great German cars of the 80s. When it was launched in 1986, it combined high levels of comfort and refinement with BMW's trademark driving dynamics. It left the native and British competition looking decidedly dated, and the range-topping 750i set new standards of performance in the segment, not only in terms of outright speed, but the ease and safety with which this was achieved. It was almost certainly the best large saloon car in the world.
But with the model now nearly 38 years old, how does it stack up today when driven as originally intended? Well, not so long ago, I decided to find out. My name's Ed, and I recently purchased a 1990 730i with about 130,000 miles on the clock and just started driving it. Pretty much every day, and often in quite a spirited manner. And now, with about 6,000 miles behind the wheel, the long story short is that I really like it. Despite the obvious retro feel, it doesn't seem like a car that is really 34 years old, and I think it's a testament to the original design and build standard of these. You can put one into daily use with very little complaint indeed. The car costs £5 grand, and I have spent a few more grand on it since, but it is essentially an unrestored vehicle, albeit one that has been looked after in its life. I'll look at costs and maintenance in future videos, but for now let me just offer some reflections on what I believe to be one of Munich's finest barnstormers.
As a purchase, the E32 was a perfect storm of history and nostalgia. My dad also had a white one back in the day, and I love the look of the 80s and 90s Beamers. They are one of the most recognisable design families of the era, clean but with purpose. Very much of their time, but without seeming dated or old-fashioned. Real zeitgeist cars. This example was particularly original, and I fell in love with the blue-grey interior, and details such as the correct dealer-fit stereo and pop-up cassette storage felt bang on period. It was also completely stock, with standard ride height and wheels. The carpet mats are labelled Made in West Germany, a nice geopolitical touch from the time. I find the E32 very agreeable to drive. It's composed on the motorway and holds up well on both A and B roads. It obviously carries more weight than its smaller E30 or E34 siblings, but the same dynamic feel is present. It's not as taut as a modern BMW, but there is a balance to it that feels just right. The steering is nicely weighted. It's not particularly fast, but then it doesn't have to be. Overall it feels stable, but with a nice bias to oversteer if you really push on. Occasionally it shows its design age with a bit of body flex on coarse surfaces or hard cornering, but that's really nitpicking. The earlier 730i and 735i models use the venerable M30 straight six. It won't set the world alight, but the performance is better than the 0-60 time of around 10 seconds would suggest. The M30 is also one of BMW's strongest engines of the period and will do big miles on nothing more than regular oil changes. The 4-speed auto is, by modern standards, inevitably a compromise on ratios, but the engine is strong in the mid-range when in second and third, so that crucial 50 to 70 sprint feels quick enough. Even if at lower speed, things take longer to build. Straight sixes are also available with a manual, which is a little quicker, but I think the auto suits the car quite nicely.
Now the E32's design and components had to support the range-topping 750i's top speed of 250 km an hour, potentially on a regular basis. The outside lane of an unrestricted autobahn often moves well over 200 km an hour, and even the 730i can hit 225 by 140 miles an hour, so the brake, suspension, steering all had to be up to the job. And I think that's what I really notice about the E32, particularly for a car of its age. Although the 730i is obviously not particularly quick performance-wise, it does feel on the motorway like a car that was built to do high speeds.
The refinement also had to match. There is a bit of wind noise by modern standards, but the engine is unobtrusive at high RPM, so the low ratio of top gear is largely unnoticed. I also find the interior is a pleasant place to be, with comfortable seats and a good driving position, so as a long-distance cruiser, it really does excel.
But does it make sense as something to drive all the time? Well, possibly. The fuel consumption is probably somewhere between 15 and 20 mpg, so doing mega miles in them is not great in that regard, but from a comfort and reliability point of view, the German stuff from the 80s onwards is now well into daily driver territory. Something to be really clear about when you're buying one is whether you're getting a project or a ready runner. They are capable of being, daily driver levels of reliability, but there are also a lot of neglected examples out there. and anything that's been off the road for a long time or has significant corrosion, it's going to be very expensive to fix. Unless it's something special, like a 750i or an Alpina of some sort, it doesn't make sense to buy one and do one up, unless you want to do that, for the enjoyment of it. It's always more cost effective in the long run, just to get the cleanest example you can afford. All the cars will need something doing. My approach to this one is I put it in for quite a big service, an inspection too, which did produce a bit of a laundry list shortly after I bought it. There are quite a few items still on that list, but none of those items are really critical to the reliability of the car. They're just kind of on the list, and every time it goes in, I'll just try and get a few more ticked off, such that in a few years' time I'll have, a car that is basically faultless. Inevitably, extra things will come up, but as long as I keep on top of it, this car has 137,000 miles on it now, approximately. There's no reason why this car can't give me like at least another 100,000 miles on it without needing any major work on the engine or transmission or anything like that. Well, that's the plan at least. I was a bit worried that I might get bored of it, that the novelty of driving an older car might wear off, but so far not. And I think the obvious reason for that is that the E32, like the Beamers of the period, they are very good cars. They were good cars then, and they're still good cars to drive today. It's a different experience from having something from the 70s or older, where the attraction is often more in the look and the more retro feel. And actually, if you try to drive a car of that age every day, the attraction quickly wears off, because the driving experience isn't actually that great. They're noisy, they don't necessarily feel particularly safe, maybe the brakes aren't very good, etc. Whereas E32, it feels modern. It was a big step change in the mid-80s, particularly from Mercedes and BMW. Suddenly the cars just felt so much better to drive. Over the coming months, I'll do some more videos, update you on how the daily drive is going. I'll try and get a few road trips in, hopefully into Europe. Although this isn't a project car, I'm sure there will be some DIY jobs on it, because I'm just that way inclined. So stay tuned for more.